Over the last few years, classic physique has quickly become the most popular division within bodybuilding, at least in the mainstream anyway. But with this type of bodybuilding being so new onto the scene, it can sometimes seem confusing what truly constitutes a classic physique. Today we'll talk about what classic physique is and how you can build one. Welcome back to Common Sense Bodybuilding. Classic physique is a division inspired by old school bodybuilding ideals. If you, like pretty much everyone else in the world, have seen Pumping Iron, then you know what I mean. Classic physiques are aesthetic, with the proportions and flow of a physique placed as a priority. Classic physique was created because of the battle between mass and proportions and aesthetics within the open bodybuilding category. It was also partially in response to the bubble gut phenomenon, and that becomes apparent when you look at how it's judged, because in fact, classic physique does not aim to emulate any one era of bodybuilding. It has an identity of its own, and I would classify it as open bodybuilding, but with mass downsized and proportions, aesthetics, symmetry and flow very much placed top of the list. And this leads us into the fluidity of classic physique and its identity, because with it being in its infancy, the best that I feel they can do is place one certain physique, the physique they deem to be most impressive at the time, at the top of the pedestal, and judge the others based on that one. But this isn't new. Open bodybuilding has gone through similar shifts. There were times whereby aesthetics and flow were the priority, the 70s, the 80s, the infancy of bodybuilding, where mass was less of a possibility, and mass monsters were very much the outliers. Then leading into the 90s and noughties, where mass quite simply became far more possible. The likes of Dorian and Ronnie Coleman and Jay Cutler truly transformed the sport and placed mass at the top of the pedestal once people saw just what could be accomplished. And I feel open bodybuilding is now moving towards a pretty balanced mixture of all, with Phil Heath being a bodybuilder who could combine insane mass and fullness with symmetry, proportions and aesthetics. We've simply been spoiled, and that's now the standard. I very much believe classic physique will follow suit, with multiple different phases of the division and different directions to its identity. But because of those foundational rules of taking old school ideals and implementing them into modern day mass, we can look to both the reasons for creating this division and the current champions to hazard a guess at what it takes to build one. So I guess the first point in how you build a classic physique isn't technically able to be built until genetic editing becomes a bit less morally ambiguous. But genetics and structure are incredibly important parts of any bodybuilding physique, no more so than classic. It's a division with universal weight caps for your height. So you're going to have people at exactly the same weight competing against each other. That leaves very little in your control to sway the favour. And unlike in open bodybuilding, you can't simply outmass bad genetics or structure. There are a few things you can look for in terms of your structure to dictate whether you have a high chance of success within classic physique. Firstly, wide clavicles or shoulders. A wide upper frame will help you create the X taper and have far more of an illusion of size than other competitors. A small waist will also help to do the same job, taking those wide shoulders and tapering them in to a very tight, tiny waist, which again emphasizes your X frame. And of course, height. Somebody at 6'1" with a maxed out muscle mass looks far more impressive than somebody at, say, 5'6" with the same muscle mass. When they're being compared in an overall lineup on the same stage, your eye will simply be drawn to the taller competitor. So we've discussed the genetic advantages that you can have in order to build that X-frame in classic physique, but what about the ones within your control? Proportions are a majorly important part of classic physique, and they can in fact be altered by every competitor if you put enough time, effort, and a tailored plan in place to do so. My favourite post recently was from John Lofthouse, basically saying that when you're doing a front double bicep or back double bicep, if your bicep does not extend beyond your shoulder or your tricep beyond your shoulder, then you need bigger arms. Though an oversimplification, it's true that certain body parts simply take priority within classic physique when there's a weight cap. Now, it's worth saying that there are no set rules in terms of what proportions will get you a win. However, we can look to bodybuilders past and present to help dictate what we might look to strive for. So here we have three very different versions of a classic physique ideal. The truth of the matter is, Arnold had a very unbalanced physique, but it's one that your eye can't help but be drawn to. The extreme development development of his chest and arms may not seem ideal in today's world of the prioritization of the shoulders. However, it did help to create one of the most beautiful upper bodies in bodybuilding history. It may not seem ideal or may seem counterproductive, but I actually believe that not having a mathematically perfect physique can go in a competitor's favor. This has been spoken about by Fuad on his podcast before, how when somebody is perfectly proportioned and they just have everything looking like it's exactly where it's meant to be, that can actually make them a little bit forgettable. Now, Frank is pretty much the opposite of this, and they competed around the same time through the 70s and 80s. But one of them has 7 Sandows, and one of them only has 3. Frank had a very specific view and ideals around how his body should look. His goal was always symmetry and shape. But the truth is that he always looked unimpressive when he was next to Arnold, somebody who had very overdeveloped body parts and was not perfectly in proportion, and yet Arnold did say that in his eyes he was. Why is this? Well, because Arnold created the physique that he wanted to have. Frank focused more on the mathematics of a perfectly balanced one. Shape is not good enough alone to dominate the Mr. Olympia stage. When you don't have anything unique to your physique, or anything that truly stands out, that can help to draw the eye to other competitors who may have slightly dominant body parts, but that still can't help but capture your attention. However, I will admit that within a weaker lineup, a perfectly balanced physique can help to demonstrate the flaws of other competitors. And now, ladies and gentlemen, unzip your trousers because we're on to the main event. Chris Bumstead has become a standout champion and benchmark for the classic physique standard, a strong demonstration of compromise between these two ideals. Chris has a great X-frame, an amazingly small waist. He's well developed and holds an obscene amount of mass. And he has strengths in areas that other competitors are often lacking, such as lower body and chest area. By chest area, I mean the surface area. How much room on his torso does this take up? He also has height in his favor and structure, meaning this man has nailed both the genetic elements and those within his control. Hence why he's on the wall. With this in mind, even though I don't personally buy into a mathematical equation for bodybuilding, there are some traits we can look for here in order to build a classic physique based on these competitors. I personally believe that a larger surface area of your chest is desirable, much like with Arnold and Chris. Now, this will again be personal opinion, but I believe that chest dominance does define the golden era of bodybuilding. And though we don't take the golden era ideals as the absolute standard, it is fucking classic. A wide upper body, wide clavicles, strong back development, a proportionally developed lower body, something that Arnold significantly lacked. Taking John Lofthouse's rule, arms that surpass or at least match the shoulder development. A small waist, as we all know, and for a personal one in for me, density of the back. This is something that often in competitors is lacking, hence why they say that shows are won from the back. And yes, I'm working on it. But if you do want a more mathematical approach, there's the golden ratio. Based on the Grecian ideals, in summary, to achieve the ideal male body, you want your arms and calves to be 2.5 times larger than your non-dominant wrist. Your shoulders should be 1.618 times larger than your waist. Very specific. Your chest should be 6.5 times larger than your wrist, and your upper leg should be 1.75 times larger than your knee. The Grecian ideal or golden ratio can be a useful framework, but it's also unattainable for most. All you can do is try and look for your own individual classic physique traits. What are you genetically blessed with? And what do you believe that you can create with your body? This division is still very much open to interpretation, and your vision of a classic physique could dictate the future of the sport. Now, we've talked about how to build a classic physique, and obtaining one is incredible, but it's useless without being able to present it. Posing's the art that glues bodybuilding together as a sport. Without it, we're pretty much just objectified meat slabs. And posing is as much about hiding your flaws as it is showcasing your strengths. Though the classic physique ideals are not directly influenced by any one era, I'm pretty certain that the posing ideals are. These ideals are taken directly from the silver and golden era of bodybuilding. Classic physique can truly be an artistic expression, as shown through Terence Ruffin and the classic pumping iron footage of Arnold practicing ballet in order to enhance his balance and flow. Although, let's face it, that was probably staged if we know anything about Arnold and pumping iron. The victory pose, for example, is one that was pretty much derived to demonstrate flaws in physiques. Hit a victory pose and look impressive, you have to be pretty damn perfect. The mantis pose pretty well showcases the chest and arms, staples of golden era bodybuilder. Twisting back double bicep can help to hide any slightly larger waists, and emphasize back development. This is a staple of why Arnold used them himself. To master these poses, you need mobility, flexibility, mass, the right proportions, and a fuck ton of practice. This doesn't come easy, and when performed properly, posing can be just as taxing as any form of cardio. But you are required to actually do classic posing within the division, so you can't just hit the stage and do any old bodybuilding pose. But this can also help to differentiate you, who may be more passionate, than somebody who's just done it because it fits their height and weight cap. It does mean that if you're not truly passionate and love the artistic side of bodybuilding, then you've not got much of a chance of making it on those top stages. I'd go as far as to say that to be a truly competitive classic physique pro, a posing coach is a standard requirement, unless you're just as good as Terence Ruffin. Ez, for example, has a family history of dancing. Terence Ruffin is an athlete who has stated that the posing and the presentation is his favourite part about the sport of bodybuilding. Almost all of the people we've talked about today and the physiques they present hold different USPs, different selling points, and different ideals of what classic bodybuilding truly is. But a truly classic physique will always be built with the genetics of a broad structure and small waistline, a masterful eye for detail and proportion, and last but not least, it's presented with passion and fluency. If you're still not sure whether you yourself possess the foundations of a classic physique, maybe it's not for you. But check out my video on the different divisions within bodybuilding in which you should compete in if you really want to know for sure. And I'll see you in the next one.